Hello
Hello,
everyone. How are you? Hope everyone's good. So I'm Tina Mystery, Brown psychologist. Welcome to the Brown Therapist Network monthly discussion. I'm joined by an amazing array of panelists today. I've got my co-host today with me, Kino. Kino's waving. So welcome. This is part of our monthly sort of panel discussions that we run every month. It really is inspired by the conversations that we have as part of the Brown Therapist Network, but also inspired by the commentary that you will be making, in social media as well. So please do get in touch. This is a discussion. It is discussion around anti-Blackness within the South Asian community. This is something we want to address head on and challenge. And I really hope that this inspires everybody to think a little bit about what causes our biases and really to reflect on how we can do better and ways support the Black community as well. But this is a very broad conversation. I hope you get involved, ask questions, ask our panelists any questions. There are functions. And yeah, we've got Keenal now who will be starting a little bit of a presentation. So I'll pass over to Keenal.
Hello everyone, I'm Kino, and as you can see, this is just a slight disclaimer, but any views that will be spoken about in this panel discussion, we may also have our own biases because we're not from the Black community, so we can't really speak on behalf of them, but hopefully we can shed a light on what we know about anti-Blackness and just address it from our own points of view. So it's just a small disclaimer for anyone watching. And if any of us show any biases throughout, then feel free to call us out in the chat function thing on the side of your screen. Just let us know. You can question us on it. Yeah, please feel free. I'll just start the presentation just to introduce the topic slightly to you all. This will just take a second. This is the wonders of having events online, guys.
Yeah, it's all good, it's all good. So if you do have any questions for our panelists, please do comment in the box. I don't know which side it is. That might be that side or it might be that side. I don't know. But, we want this to be an open discussion. We want to be challenged. We want to really think hard about how we need to check in with our biases, not only as therapists, but also as people who are part of a community. Okay, so Kino is getting this.
Can you guys see it properly?
Yeah, so you just need to do this kind of view slideshow thing, whatever that's
okay, weird.
Technical term is.
Oh, oops.
There you go.
Okay, but it's coming. It's definitely still coming on, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, just a little bit more about us. We're a global community of South Asian therapists, and we want to challenge Eurocentric mental health. We want to inspire learning, growth, and development. You might have seen us on social media. You might have seen our website. We really want to create a real connection between all the South Asian therapists out there. Okay, so what is anti-Blackness? Anti-Blackness refers to the particular prejudices, structural and systemic issues faced by Black people, and it recognizes that it's given this term because it recognizes that racism towards all non-white groups is not the same. And unfortunately, anti-Blackness, it runs rampant in many countries around the world. There is a hierarchy, as some people might call it, and Black people have been placed at the bottom. Anti-Blackness can potentially show up in a few different forms. You might have seen some of these, and others you might not be aware about. But it can range from a South Asian person clutching their handbag a little bit tighter if there's a Black person around, just because they feel threatened in some kind of way. It can be people against South Asian and Black people having relationships, even if they're okay with a white partner. It could be a Nigerian student in India and they're denied housing because of their skin color. And it can be police brutality against Black people, again, in India, in Pakistan, or here. Why is anti-blackness so pervasive in South Asian society? So there's lots and lots of reasons why it is, and we'll be touching on a few of these reasons. So there are some links to colorism. Of course, there's lots of ignorance. There's anti-black stereotypes everywhere. It could potentially link to casteism, colonialism, maybe even self-loathing. So what parts of the world do we live together in? There's lots of different countries. So there's here in the UK, where I currently am. There's the US, where one of our panelists is currently living. There's East Africa and South Africa and in the Caribbean. So political blackness. Some of you watching might have heard this term previously, and it's a term that arguably brought us closer together at one point. It's a term that's been given to all non-white people, essentially, because we have been kind of clumped together in somewhat recent history, and South Asians have also been called Black, and we've also been lumped under the terms such as person of color, Black and ethnic minority communities, and more recently, people of the global majority. So has this actually brought us closer? And these are some things that may have driven us apart, and some other things that we'll touch on throughout this discussion later. So what has driven us apart? Has the model minority myth had something to do with driving our, our groups apart, or the desire to be white adjacent, or socioeconomic differences, or again, colorism, which is a big one that we'll hear plenty about later on. And of course, we do come together at times too. Love kind of conquers all at some point. There's there's a growing number of South Asian and Black relationships, and lots of them are lovingly accepted, and people are tolerant and more than tolerant towards them. But of course, there's also the darker side where a South Asian person might be disowned just because of the person that they love. So these can create some crazy obstacles for people, and they wouldn't necessarily face them if they were with a white partner or another South Asian partner. So what kind of toll does that actually take on someone? So these are just a few of the questions that we'll be answering later. Our lovely panelists will be leading the discussion, and anyone watching at home, please also send in your questions too. We'll be delving further into how does anti-blackness show up in the South Asian community? What are the experiences of living in a Black majority country such as Uganda if you are a South Asian? And what's the psychological impact of anti-blackness as a whole on both Black communities? And these are our panelists. One of them is not currently with us. He may attend later on, but currently we have Urmila Patel, who's the author of Out of Uganda in 90 Days. And she grew up in Uganda in the 1960s and 70s. And she currently lives in the US and works as a life coach, Reiki master, and yoga instructor. We have Poonam Kataria, who co-owns Rasta Farmers with her partner. And she comes from a Gujarati family, and she's in a relationship with her Jamaican partner, Ollie. And if Africa does join us later, he creates short films and speeches to educate and empower people. He's a Nigerian man, and he lives in India, and he's an activist and sheds a light on the horrific treatment many Africans face across India. And we have Samantha Patel, a forensic psychologist and change maker, and she specializes in the assessment, understanding, and identification of strategies for diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-racism. So that's our wonderful panel.
Amazing. Thanks, Kino, for that introduction, but also a bit of an insight into what is anti-Blackness and what does it look like within our communities for people who might not fully understand it as a kind of idea. So let's just delve right in, because, you know, I feel like that we really need to address what does anti-Blackness look like within our community. We've all got families, we've all got friends, we all sit together, we all have, you know, food and drink, we have conversations about different groups of people from different countries. But actually, how does it show up in those spaces? How does it show up in the spaces where we congregate with other members within our community? Tell us a little bit about how you think it shows up within the South Asian community.
So I think he now mentioned it quite a few times, and she discussed colorism quite prominently. I think from my own experiences in a Gujarati family and being relatively fair-skinned, it's been something that has been a topic of conversation our entire lives. I did a little bit of research today because I was obviously looking into the topic and the subject, and having studied sociology and psychology and working in advertising, I have a keen interest in how the media portrays various different ethnicities and communities. I think the crazy statistic that I found is that India's largest selling skincare lightening cream actually makes 256 million in annual revenue. I think that just goes to show that colorism is a massive, massive thing in India, and having dark skin versus light skin is already such a big issue. So when you bring anti-Blackness on top of that, there is even more of a divide between white people, brown people, black people, and skin tone. And those discussions are happening all around us. I think my own personal experience from meeting my partner, who has the name Oliver, the assumption was that he was white, and no one questioned whether I was doing something outside of the norm or something that was accepted. It was only once I'd actually disclosed that he was Jamaican that the discussion almost changed. And that's when I realized that this discrimination is far beyond just Indians. It's everywhere. It's amongst communities, and it's discussed in ways that seem soft and acceptable when you're in a family environment. But from the outside looking in and being in my situation now, it's definitely not acceptable. And I think it's all of our it's our power to try and change that within our families, within our communities, and with the discussions that we have.
Thanks, Poonam. Does anyone want to add to that?
Yeah, I would like to add colorization and your relationship. I have had the same. I believe there is a big impact. Even the family, the parents go through. I have one of my culture, not an Indian culture, and he's like outcast, and he goes through all this trauma in his life. life. He's a man and he doesn't say much. But my mother, I could say, she went through a deep. There's an ego added to it, that it is a belief system and it has to be this way. Not no means it has been created from generations, and they do not want to put it up or change their belief. I can understand if you are in India, would be a different set than we are out here in a multicultural living cultural society among all these different castes and religion and cultures. So she went to a deep trauma in her life and ended up having a stroke, and she passed away. She was paralyzed then. She did not give up. And that happened to me also. I was the doctor. Was in love with a white boy when I was in Belgium. They denied. In my time, it was afraid to. I told my parents and I obeyed them, and I didn't want to hurt them anymore. So I ended up with an arranged marriage, and just after the arrangement, they distanced me. They distanced me. That I had no relationship. There is all this. If the impact happens to both sides, the couples who are married and even to the family and parents. Thank you.
I agree. I think that definitely happened with me. My mum and my brothers, my immediate family, very much protects me. The elder brothers, my dad unfortunately passed away when I was younger, so I do get a lot of "what would your dad say?" And that is something that has caused me trauma in my life. It's effectively putting the guilt of my dead dad on my own life choices. So I completely understand the impact that it has on people individually, and that's why I'm so passionate about trying to change that, or to give other people a voice. I think recently they put mine and Oliver's story on Blindian Project, and I had about 5 or 6 girls who are currently in that trauma and that predicament of confronting their family about their feelings of love and the fear that they have within themselves. And it saddens me that we have to, in a world that's so complex, we can't even let the purest of feelings, love, just run through as it should. We let these cultural biases and this stigma and this prejudice that's gone on for generations impact our choices and impact our happiness, and it needs to kind of stop. But yeah, it is something that I carried myself as well. I mean, I didn't tell my mum for a good 7-8 months before I kind of let her know what the situation was. And it was only because we were coming back to the UK. I thought I would just keep it a secret for as long as I needed to, which is awful. But it just seemed like the easier option.
I think
I guess there's also intersectionality to consider here.
Yeah, society, pressure from the society, fear from society. That's the most fear that our parents feared, and that's how they ended up having this belief system. And
Definitely.
And unprocessed trauma, collective and individual, has a huge impact on how we, see ourselves, the world, and others. And I think some of the things that you're talking about, Urmila, and you, Poonam, are really around, when we're in that state and it's intergenerational trauma, we consider, am I surviving? Am I thriving? What am I doing? I've just got to make it through. As migrants, for example, in terms of other parts of identity, how do I do that? I'm trying to make a living. I'm trying to be seen to be successful within a capitalist society. I'm trying to be create a better future for my children, whatever that might look like.
mm-hmm.
And I think within our own colorism, you talk, Poonam, about Fair and Lovely, or those products. We have the role of Bollywood, which Poonam, sorry, not Poonam, Kinal talked in a presentation around. You've got Priyanka Chopra basically, promoting these products and now talking about being proud of her identity. This is confusing. These are confusing messages for a young generation. I mean, I remember being younger, and I don't know if you had similar experiences, but when you're darker skinned, I remember my Massey, love her to bits, she's passed away now. She used to rub me with John on a Lord, chickpea flour, right? To try and make me fairer. These are things that we're grown up with, right? So our anti-blackness sentiment begins at a very early age. And it is a representation and a symptom of whiteness and white supremacy. Sorry.
100%. I totally agree. Going on.
Definitely, I would say about you, that comes my story again, that I was born dark skinned, elder sister, and I was born in India, and I think, I don't know, I was a child, correct, at the what happened, but I think there was something all my life, and I'm just reeling myself, there's a part little left, that I was differentiated between my siblings. I was a darker, was called different names, Kalima. And my mother used to say, when they say from India to Uganda, they were going to East Africa. I was 1.5 years old, and my mother afterwards, when I was a teenager, she used to tell me, we were going to throw you in the ocean. She had multiple times reminded me that we were going to throw you in the water. For what reason? It might be the reason. But then when I was a teenager, they tried to burn me. They poured kerosene on me. I was in Uganda, and I still carry the little scars. It's lighter and lighter. I carry those scars. One of the things they did also put me, rape me in. I became resistant and stubborn child, teenager that time. They raped me in a bed sheet and said, we are going to throw you in the ocean, in the water. There was a Lake Victoria. It didn't happen, but these are the situations that you carry whole of your life, yes, and until end of the life, if we don't take care of ourselves. Like Reiki master, and I do yoga therapies, and I have done a lot of healings through the last 10 decades, and I have come to this that I can be able to face here and talk about that today. Yes.
Wow.
Thank you, Urmila. Were you going to say something, Poonam?
I just feel like after that my comments seem extremely superficial, so I'm going to hold it. But effectively, I was just talking about the media again. I think only last month in Vogue Pakistan, they had white models, English Caucasian models, modeling Asian outfits. And I mean, it's unattainable beauty standards for brown and black or various different communities. And I think that rings true for all media consumption and all media ownership. I think our representation in media is so marginal compared to our actual existence that no wonder we are treated so differently, or there is so much prejudice going on. I mean, just thinking of blackface, for example, that was a form of entertainment, an absolute ridiculous form of entertainment. And there's been big celebrities like Jimmy Fallon in 2020 who actually took part in a joke like that. I think even in the Oscars recently, there was a skit that was done with blackface mentioned, and it just really highlights that the dehumanization of darker skin tones within a global media system that is predominantly owned by white middle class males. So I think obviously there is a big change and a lot more that we need to do to change that. But those biases are from such a young age that Urmila's had to face that from being young. So imagine how many other people are going through that on a daily basis. It's saddening, really.
Yeah. And I think the other component of this is it's more prevalent for women. So there is a gender issue here as well, gender identity. So, if you have a firstborn boy, right, who's a bit darker skinned, I have no doubt that treatment is very different to a female who may be darker skinned. Look at Bollywood, for example. We talked about social media, right? It's okay. You don't see any darker skinned girls, right? But again, talking about fashion and all of the way that we are represented in social media, there is a kind of, like I say about intersectionality, it does depend as well on the gender we identify with, and I think that makes a huge impact for us in terms of how we process the trauma. Because, of course, if I see that my my brother is being treated differently, and there's other issues in our culture already about that, right? But it makes such a big difference on how I'm processing that then. And I think we often underestimate the role of that in our cultures, that it's not just one aspect of my identity. So even now we're talking mainly about straight relationships. What about gay relationships? You know, so I was married to a Gujarati woman, you know, for a long time. What if she was black? It would have been like, you know, oh my, you know, how can you be gay and want to be with a black person? You know, so these are kind of, you know, there are so many complexities in here, and I think that, you know, the binary thinking that we often have just reflects again whiteness thinking. You know, that's what we often think of, you know, and I think that's some of the things that we need to start changing. How do we think about these things? How do we view these things as a systemic issue, not just an interpersonal issue?
Yeah.
Exactly. I love the fact that you highlighted that we really need to think about all of the intersections as well, because a lot of the time you're right, we do just focus on certain ones really, and we need to think about all of them.
Yes, in general, all of them. It's true.
Yeah, I'm just going to have a look at some of these comments that we've had so far. Thank you, everybody who has commented. So we've had a comment here. I've noticed anti-Blackness amongst some Asian colleagues in the workplace on a few occasions in different roles. Having previously worked in psychology roles, I noticed these prejudice. That was from Lily. And then
There was also this one before that. Sorry,
sorry, did I miss one?
It was just for Urmila. One of our listeners, when you were telling your story, she just wanted to tell you that you're beautiful and just, you know, remind you of that, which I think is a really important thing. If, you know, we're ever told that we're darker skinned, like that is still beautiful. And she's right, you're beautiful.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Sorry, I missed that one. Next one is from Radha. I agree with the point about assimilation. I wonder where the social in-out group theory applies, in the sense to create a belonging in a social group by sharing a dislike for the other. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. Radha, thank you for that. Sam, do you want to kind of add anything with regards to that? Because that's obviously a huge thing we have within the world of psychology, don't we, in social psychology?
Yeah, I guess I just want to add about, you know, there's been a lot of, especially in the UK, around with don't get me started on the ridiculousness of the Commission's report. But, you know, one of the recommendations of that report is around looking at, you know, we need to move away from diversity type training and looking at bias, etc., etc. I mean, I don't know if anyone's read the book. Her name, Sway. I forget her name. It will come back to me in a minute. She talks a lot. It's a great book that talks a lot about the role of bias in racism, and in particular around in-group and out-group. You know, when we have in-group and out-group, the research now is showing us that within seconds, milliseconds of meeting somebody, I will determine are they in my group or out of my group. And it starts from the age of 6 months. So all of this BS around kids don't see race, and they can't talk about it, but you can see it in the way that they have eye contact and the way they react to other people. The whole basis of in-group and out-group is all about safety. As human beings, we want to always feel safe. We want to always have comfort. How do I do that? If we think about the reptilian part of our brain, back in the day, if I'm sitting in some cave and someone comes to my cave and they don't look like me, that's going to create fear, right? I'm going to decide I'm going to have that response. And so I'm going to have flight, fight, etc., freeze. So what happens in group in and group out is you have an immediate classification of people. And there's 3 main groups you do that in. Do that in race, gender, and age. They're the ones that you do quickly because they're the demographics that we can see quickly. And as we know, gender and race are social constructs. They are something that have been designed very specifically to create this mismatch, to create these disparities, and to create a them and us. So the in and out group is really around, traditionally back in the day, around survival. Now I think it's more about comfort, you know, and safety, which I can understand. So I think what our South Asian community, in my experience, again, I'm not talking on behalf of the whole group, is assimilation is usually a response to that. How do I belong? And belonging isn't seen as I belong to myself, I belong to my group, I belong to X, Y, Z. It's usually a synonym to fitting in. How do I fit in here? How do I progress? How do I be seen? How do I be heard? How do I be valued? Which is fundamentally what we all want in our lives. We all want to be seen, heard, and valued. Right?
What's
If I go to school, sorry.
It's carry on, sorry.
If I go to school, right, and people can't say my name, right? Say my name, whatever my name is, people can't say it. My name gets assimilated because I want people to say my name easily. I want my teacher to be able to talk to me. I want my friends to be able to invite me to their party and have my correct spelling on the party invite, right? I want all of these things to happen, and they sound small, but they're very important at all ages. And so assimilation starts very young, and the group in and group out, in my experience and what I've seen, is particularly important for different generations as we go through, because what's happening that I'm seeing, and we see this in our statistics. So when I first started in the prison service, for example, 20 years ago, you could see no brown faces pretty much. I'd walk into the prison. Now it's a different case. We know gang membership is rife in migrant communities because they feel like they've got a group in with that gang, because they feel grouped out with everybody else. So, assimilation and approximating to whiteness, which is what we're talking about really, is what I think the South Asian community get caught up with. And that's what the model minority myth is also connected to. But anyway, you were saying something, Poonam.
I couldn't more with that. So I think my personal experience, obviously my name's Poonam, but I go by Poo, and I have for a lot of my life, just because it's much easier to say and quite funny, so I just own it. And second of all, the assimilation side of things, when I was in the UK, I was probably so much more of a coconut, as people say, than I was when I moved to Australia. I moved to Australia and people obviously understood I had an English accent, but I would get questioned why I was brown. And it was only then that my Indian roots became something I was proud of. I then became more ingrained in my culture and my society. I met Oliver. I think since meeting him as well, I've been able to teach him about our culture. Like, it's Diwali in a couple of weeks. Yesterday he asked me, what's Diwali about? What's the story? Like, he's interested. And I think in celebrating our differences, we're able to be proud of our skin color. We're able to be proud of our religion, of our culture, of our beliefs. But I think when I was in the UK, I was very much just trying to fit in and get into a role that I could get paid good money, work in a job and be a hindrance to anyone. And I was very much white centric. And it's just that shift to another country when I was questioned about my color that I dug into my identity a little bit further, I guess. But yeah, I think that bias definitely exists 100% for Indians in the UK. I think it's very prominent amongst a lot of people that I hang out with as well.
Really interesting points. Thank you, everybody who has commented. And just to mention that the book that Sam was referring to was actually Sway by Pragna Agarwal.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ara, for dropping that for us. I had to quickly Google it as well because I kept thinking Pragna, but I couldn't see.
Yes.
But yeah, brilliant. Okay, so Urmila, I want to come to you next because I really want to understand what it was like being a minority within a Black majority. So you grew up in Uganda. And my mom's from Uganda. She was born and raised. Well, she wasn't born. Yeah, she was born there. Excuse me, and raised there until they were expelled from Uganda and moved to the UK. So she talks a lot about her experiences of what it was like, being a minority. What was it like to be a minority with a Black majority? What was that like?
I think I was a child, but looking on the viewpoint of the view of a child, actually, we were like just it. I felt like our land. It felt like we are living. I'm living in a paradise, and I would say that we children were played everywhere there was time. The locals were really innocent, and they obeyed. So the Asians, when you look at how the color, we say colorization of whatever. It can be why British or Asians. They're seen as somebody who were a little bit primitive, kind of, I would say. So mostly they were social workers and people come in, the house workers like that. They were treated actually, but they weren't treated that badly, like we see nowadays. I live in United States, and I see how the African American, look at George Floyd. I mean, how he's murdered, kind of, and all this, a lot of every day, one by one, a person is killed, of a girl is being raped, black in the black society. But in Africa, it wasn't that kind of. Living, we thought we were still superior. The whites thought that they are the superior to the Asians and the black. Become the second level, and then there were the level was the blacks. So the black were comfortable in their zone. They had their food, they earned the money, and the Asians were the backbone of Ugandan economy. So they provided all this. They had the industries and work, and everything was provided to them. So they were okay until the brutal dictator came in, and it was all about religion. It was first about the political role. Greed played a big role, and then after that there was a religion that came into that. Now the Asians out, we want the black and then what happened there, everything changed, flipped. The locals who were really us, and they were helpful, most of changed mindset. We were constantly harassed. I and my sister going to school, they tried to touch us, they tried to laugh at us, and you go back to your country. All these things started happening after that, and it was fear. We lived in fear after that. Yeah, but I would say that living in the majority of the blacks, it was it everybody had that. The community was, the whites were in the Asians lived in their community, and lived in their community, and we did not interact with each other. My parents moved to we were, I think, the only two families lived among the black community. The workers were, and we played with the children there, but we never went in their house to say, oh, this is my friend, to make a friend. That was out of question. So I believe that in our mind it was already somewhere the beliefs, the system, that we are the majority and they are the minority. That was somewhere from way back.
It's just interesting because obviously that whole East Africa situation was effectively legalized slavery. The movement of Asian communities to Africa in itself, and that the creation of having white supremacy within an African country, even you having lived that experience, are still explaining it in such a neutral way as though it's the norm. But that's because it's been filtered through us by dictatorships and unfair. I don't even know how to carry on my conversation, but yeah, it's basically why we're in this mess in the first place.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and schools also
if I may.
separated. Sure. I mean, schools
And
were
I
also
guess what we're
separated.
talking about.
Yeah. Sorry.
Urmila, do you want to have your go, and then Sam, do you mind just going after? I know
Yeah, go ahead.
with
Yeah.
a little bit of lag.
Yes.
Urmila?
Go ahead. Oh, to me?
Yeah.
Okay. No, I was just going to add, they're also separated. So the black community had their own schools, the Asians and the white had their own. Later, it changed slightly. In my experience, in my class, there were only very few, minimum 3 or 5 students, black students there. The minor, but it was okay. They lived their life, and there was no. Everybody lived happily, I would say, at that point, because there was food was there, correct? Food is people survive, and they have their own community and their own culture. And it was like we didn't live in Idi Amin came, all the everything changed. Sam?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment about colonialism and what I think Poonam was talking about a little bit, and Urmila, and you know how even the language we use, right, reflects oppression. So we talk about minority, we are the global majority, full stop, right?
Yeah.
There are more people who aren't white in this world than are white. So we talk about, I remember as a young child always thinking, why are we called ethnic minorities? Like, you know, what? Because actually, you know, quantitatively, we are the majority, but the dominant culture rules. And the dominant culture is the minority in terms of quantity, right? And I think that even the way that we frame these discussions around majority, minority, thinking about happiness, what is happiness? It's a great point you made. People lived happily. Did people feel fairly treated? Were they remunerated in a way that was fair and reasonable? Right? Did they feel that their rights were respected? Yeah. Could they be walked down the street knowing that if they got pulled over by the police tomorrow, they would be safe and be treated properly? These are the questions that sometimes I think we stay away from, and I think members of the South Asian community in particular, we, in terms of anti-blackness, we cannot compare our experiences, because when I was living in the UK, I lived in New Zealand, and I spent some time in Australia. In all of these countries, my experience is very different because I am brown and I'm not black.
Yeah.
I'm not worried. Yes, I might be treated unfairly, but I'm not going to get killed. More likely
That
than
is,
not. I'm not saying that won't happen,
yeah.
right? I'm saying it can happen. Don't get me wrong. But all the research is clear. And I think what we do is we filter out what we don't want. And human beings do this. We have our biases, right? Confirmation bias. I will filter in all the information that makes me confirm my beliefs because I want to be right. Fundamentally, I want to be right. So I was looking up some stuff like Poonam around the British Future for Commission did some research, and they looked at, you know, in the UK, who feels that there is discrimination against black people, and, you know, have they seen it, etc. And I just got some stats here. 69% of black people felt that there was prejudice against black people, right? 44% overall thought there was prejudice. 30% of Indians thought there was prejudice against black people, and 25% of white people did. We are closer to what white people think there is prejudice than what black people think there is in terms of prejudice. This is not a coincidence,
That's fire.
right?
Yeah. You know,
Right?
I
So,
would add,
yeah.
yes. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No,
After you're
please, you
finished.
speak. I finished.
No,
Yeah.
you finished? Okay. I thought, anyway, no, I was adding to, like, when you say the minor, how living in minority, the majority blacks, mostly we were, I would say, Uganda was fine. You said, Samantha, that how they were treated and how they felt. I was a child there, but if I look at this point from my view now, looking back that time, and we lived among the black community. Our house was there. There were two families there. So, and my father, we were open actually. Outside, we talked about these things, and we never went. It was okay. We played. My parents spoke with them, but mostly, I would say, when we went to India, that was a disaster. We were not welcome there in India. We were looted. And even in my village, mostly every we were, really reminded that upon that you come to India now, go back to where you came from. That was what we had to hear in our country. And we were fear. We couldn't go out shopping. Okay, there was, but over time we learned to live with them. But there was no kind of like in different countries where if the refugees, when we went, we were given, we were helped, and with love, and with that heart, locals were really nice. There were 1% discrimination was there, which I also experience, but looking at the general community was there that the Ugandan Asians are coming, let us help them out. But India was about that, we were looted, all gone, and these are the things that if there's no support financially, economically, no support. I said the Siddhis who are living in Gujarat now, they are the African descendant. They do not know. They have lived many from many centuries. I mean, decades there, and they haven't progressed yet there over there much. Now it's changing slowly, but they haven't progressed because they haven't got the opportunity, was not given to them. Now, how can they progress? But looking at the black community, we are where the Asians, brown skin, same language we spoke, same food we ate, same mandir we went, and still this was everyday reminder to us that we have to go back to the country we came from.
And I think psychologically, this also goes back to the comment one of the forgive me, I forget the name, people said around, maybe it was Radha, around group in and group out. When you become group out, that you're treated in a way that I need to survive. You are a threat to that survival. So, that's how we will do it. And I think Poo talked before about dehumanization, right? I'm going to make them appear subhuman, so allowing me to do that to them, And I think in our communities, even within our communities, we have the caste system, we have all of these systems, the way that we treat the Dalits is, appalling. And it is all about the skin color, right? The tone. And so I think that all of these complexities need to be kind of weaved in, because nothing is a binary, although, whiteness wants us to think it is.
Yeah. A lot of it does link to casteism, like you say, with the Dalits and other things. So we have another question from Radha Shah. I'm just going to go to that. So she says that her family are also from Uganda, and the anti-Blackness is entwined with their traumatic experiences from the 60s and 70s. So how do we begin to separate or manage this when talking to friends and family?
I actually have some really lovely stories which are a bit positive.
That's good. Please share.
So family, again, very much same story, same situation. Both parents from Uganda, moved, obviously were expelled from Uganda, and they have a traumatic experience within that. My mum, she's very open to discussing these kind of things with me, because obviously we're best pals and you can be honest with your mum, can't you? So I really pick at her and ask her about her experiences, how it felt, what happened. And she was just like, I understood it's a dictatorship. It's one man's oppression on a country that affected us, just like Kim Jong-lee in North Korea. Like, we can't think of it as a problem that was stemmed by every single person in Uganda. And I think we need to really remind ourselves that it isn't black people against brown people. It was Idi Amin making a decision to move them out of the country. And I think that's her perspective on the story. Second to that, the first Christmas that we came home, which was the first time that Ollie met my extended family, being my uncles, and I'm from a big family. My dad's one of 13. He passed away younger, and he's got 8 brothers. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of older uncles that have many opinions of the decisions that I've made in my life, of which I had 4 of the uncles mention to me about great friends that they had that were black or mixed race or of a different nationality or Ugandan heritage, and they told me about the stories of their friendships and the great characteristics that those people had, instead of just diluting everybody as one culture and staining everyone with this blackness. They were able to humanize my choices by the friendships that they had previously. And I think we often create this and us situation, but we're all just people. We're all people with personalities, with hearts, with feelings. And I think when you try to disembody these prejudices, I think it's important to remind ourselves of that. And I think having those conversations with my family and their traumas, it reminded them of actually the positive experiences that they had with Black people as opposed to the negative ones. And I think that is a positive way in which they've kind of have been able to accept my choices in life, and be a bit more open to cultural diversity, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And the answer to Radha Shah, her regarding how we can be talking to our family, that I would say that, like you said, not everybody is. Only one person has created, and he has brainwashed his part of was his followers, but not the other side. So when after being fled the country, was taken over by the Sudan. Well, he opened the doors for the Asians to come back, and there is no country in the world ever given their possession, everything ever they left without any documents. Uganda has given that. It was 1980 somewhere. He requested all the Uganda Asians who back, and I will give you, and then not all went back, but those who went back, they all their whatever they have left behind without any documents, and the local really heavy. Even though I came in contact with one of the person. He's 8, and he had some industries there, and he said I weapon, but when I went there, the meeting with my employees, the locals, they were really happy to see me. So I didn't house anywhere, and they prepare food for them with them, and you see how they. So to answer the question, Radha Shah's question is that, yeah, like not the whole country, correct? Everybody is became like against the Asians. They suffered. The locals suffered. Many of them suffered after we left. We were the backbone of Uganda economy, correct? We knew how to create something out of nothing, and did not learn that part, and so suffered. And so they were happy. Everything is changed. The new waves are coming to Uganda, and they become with a different mindset. They are mixing. They are interracial relationships there, and things are changing now.
So there's more integration with both of the communities.
Yes.
That's good.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so how are we doing for time, Keenal? Yeah, my time checker.
I think we can go to the next question.
So
everyone's happy to do so.
Yeah. So is that the third one? What psychological impact does anti-Blackness within the South Asian community have on the Black community? So I'm wondering if I could give this question to Sam, because, you know, one of the things that we've addressed, you know, is the humanization aspect of it. And if we could empathize and show compassion to the harm that is often created with anti-Blackness, I think that's where we start to hopefully create some connections. And I'm wondering if there is any way we can start to understand what that might look like within the Black community. It's difficult because I'd love to have Africa here who could speak on behalf of the Black African community. But as a psychologist, you know, what are your thoughts around this? What do you see? Because obviously, you know, Urmila alluded to a hierarchy and the impact of that hierarchy. What do you see that as?
I think there's a few components to this, and I think fundamentally, you know, the difference between, I guess, what we could call lateral violence or oppression, which is what we're talking about here, is when the oppressed becomes the oppressor, if you like, right? So as a member of the South Asian community, you've experienced some kind of prejudice in some shape or form, right? If you live in a Eurocentric world, or even exposed to social media that is of Western origin. So when that is, then you experience that. So you have experience of that. You know what that feels like. You know what it feels like when people don't see you. You know what it feels like when people invalidate your experiences. You know what it feels like when you're unfairly treated. This is not stuff we do not know. The question is, why do then we have barriers to understanding how it might be even worse for another group? You know, and a lot of that is because fear of vulnerability, fear of what I might lose, right? Fear of uncertainty. Yeah. No, we all want to succeed, whatever that looks like for different people. And I think that the question in terms of lateral violence is what gets in our way. We have the ability to do it. The question is whatever gets in our way of compassion, right? Or empathy, or perspective taking. There's lots of different components. There's a cognitive component, there's an emotional component, there's a spiritual component, there's lots of different components. But essentially, it is our fears that get in our way. So in the South Asian community, for example, I think the fear is often about loss. What am I going to lose, right? What am I going to lose if I'm not just a bystander, I'm an ally, or I'm an activist? What am I going to lose? Am I going to lose my Audi and my nice car and my status with my white friends, right? Am I going to lose social media followers, right? Because when I'm compliant, I get less hassle, right? When I don't speak up, life is good, because the myth of meritocracy continues. The myth that if I work hard, I can achieve. I want to hold on to that myth. Why? Because it gives me a chance. Because that's what my parents fought for. Because that's what's been sacrificed for. I'm holding on to that with everything I have. Because if I let go of that, oh my gosh, I'm complicit. I am part of this problem. Shit. I have a role in it. Oh my God. So when Black Lives Matter happens, you know, you can see what happens. You can see that actually, yeah, Black Lives Matter, so do we. You know, that's anti-Blackness, right? Because actually anti-Black racism is the issue. Even when you look at the race, I have to talk about it because it just, you know, gives me rage. The commissioner's race report doesn't talk about anti-Blackness. We want to move away from that. Let's not talk about BAME anymore. I think part of that, in my view, is because actually there's too much power in bringing all these people together. Let's keep separating them, because what's colonialism, right? You divide and conquer. How were the British able to conquer such a big country with so many people? It wasn't about the quantity of them. It was about their ability to divide and conquer, right? So let's carry on doing that. So I think in terms of psychological impact on the Black community, I can't speak for them. What the research shows us is that racism has an impact on every part of us. Physically, whether it's heart disease, whether it's even things like cognitive capacity. So you have stereotype threat bias, right? Where if I'm worried that, say, let's take it away from race just so people can maybe, you know, be less defensive around it. Even when it comes to things like STEM and gender, right? As a female, if I think, am I going to be good at maths? Am I going to, just my worry about, can I do this, means that my cognitive capacity is depleted, which means I'm less likely to do well on my task, which means that it reinforces the stereotype that women can't do, girls can't do that, right? Same with race. Yeah. And I think the other part of lateral violence that the research isn't there on it, actually, because I actually looked it up for this today, because actually people don't want to talk about it. People don't want to talk about the fact that we are part of the problem. It's easier to be the victim of or victimized, I should say, by the problem than be part of the problem. We are part of the problem. Because if we all stood together in solidarity, the world would look very different. Let's look at the positions that we hold in terms of the South Asian community, right? We are now the Home Secretary. We are now, you know, we have people in positions of power with financial privilege. Yeah. We have socioeconomic privilege the Black community in general do not, especially in the UK, right? Educational privilege, etc. How do we use that? You know, I have friends I went to college with, I went to school with. They have all these positions of power and privilege. Are they being activists or allies? They're being bystanders because it works for them to conform to the minority myth. Sorry.
It's very frustrating to witness. I'm in a very corporate role, or I was a director for a Dentsu Aegis, second biggest advertising agency in the world, 22 clients, 22 million portfolio, very white centric, male centric industry, and I was a brown girl in Australia running a team of 23 staff. But I wanted to make a change. I wanted to evolve. I wanted to join the diversity inclusion team. I wanted to help really embed the differences in our community within not just hiring and recruitment, but also within the advertising that we were putting out there. So having coloured faces on the TV screen or on the adverts. But this is Australia. So in the UK, we're a little bit more integrated, I would say, from a cultural perspective. Whereas when I moved to Australia, I saw that that didn't exist, and I wanted to really be a part of the change. But it was almost like an impossible task. It made me realize that my voice is better suited to having an independent acknowledgement than being part of a system that is there to benefit some over others. And my fight felt like I was talking to a brick wall as opposed to really trying to instill any change. And then since moving to the UK, I've now started where I like to help smaller brands, smaller businesses. I help grow young brands, young businesses, people that are of colour, a lot of black owned businesses, a lot of brown owned businesses, because I believe that we need to really start changing and having more of a voice within that media set, within advertising, within so many different realms. But it's frustrating even now when you're looking at the likes of Priti Patel and her views on many different things, being a brown woman and that being her voice. It's very much like she is in the in crowd, as you guys were discussing before, as opposed to really fighting and flying the flag for everyone. And I think that's what we should be fighting for. It's for anti-blackness. It's for an equal opportunity for everyone. And there's a lot that needs to happen to change that because of colonialism. Like, these issues are deep rooted into our lives on a day-to-day basis. So it's how do you actually go and break that? How do you debunk that is the question, is the predicament.
I love how we kind of answer a question with a question, because that's what we do. Welcome to the world of psychologists and how we think. It's a really tricky area,
Yes.
isn't it? And you know, there's so many things, Sam, so many things that you touched on that I just felt, and I physically felt them as you were talking. We know the damage that occurs. We know that. We see it, and yet we turn a blind eye to it. I still remember the comments that I heard around the Black Lives Matter protests from within my own circle of, why are they doing this now? Why is this important? Do they not know it's COVID? And I was just like, oh my gosh, how do we even start to challenge these deep-rooted ideas of, you know, this being a hindrance? This is not hindrance. This is a fight to survive.
Yeah, and kind of stemming on from that, I remember also around the protests last year when I was trying to talk to my parents, and there was a lot of defensiveness, I would say, because it started off as a conversation on, you know, obviously why Black lives are important and the extra level of racism that they face. And I remember trying to discuss this with my dad, and he didn't seem like he fully wanted to listen. And then I think there was this video that went viral of some looting that was going in some shops, I think in New York. the people looting, they happened to be Black, and I think it was in a South Asian store or something like that. And there was a lot of defensiveness that kind of blocked him being able to listen. And he kind of turned around and went like, oh, but they're doing this. And it's like suddenly grouping them together again. And it's an increased level of defensiveness because you feel that threat, I think. So I think that also kind of plays a part into that. And it just further divides the true groups, which is awful to see.
I think that sometimes is part of the strategy to separate us.
Exactly.
Definitely,
weakening.
Sorry. No, sorry. My interrupting. Yeah, I mean to say that I saw that also in the news, and at first you say what's happening here, correct? But it's separating. It's created, and it's not created even. The ones who were protesting, created by somebody else, the third party comes into.
Exactly.
And the image said, it goes to the personal people who are doing protesting or whatever they are doing. So there's kind of a separation. But I like the way you, is that Samantha or said about compassion, give compassion and let go fear, and that is what is holding us. That fear inside ourselves, fear of will they take from me? What will I lose? I love that one. Yeah, I love it. So that has that holding. We have to awareness that okay, nothing. Just with compassion, with love, you can achieve any you want. Yeah, I have Jamaican friends, and I have a few of the invited one time to a writers conference, and it was a retreat actually. Only one from Uganda, only brown skin. The rest were all Black ladies. There were 6, 7 of them. And nice for it was a 3-day retreat on the mountain, and I could see that at the one of the nights there was a storm, rain, and windows were open. We were nicely on the hill, everything. But when the storm happened and there was a big sound outside, those all of the ladies, I could see in their eyes, they looked at each other and they fear. Actually, they really fear. They say, lock the doors, lock the windows, and I could sense that where the listening came from is from way back. They are also holding it into themselves that somebody might come because of their skin color.
Oh, wow.
And that whole we're all triggered, our trauma is triggered by different things, especially the senses, sound, smells. We know this, and I think that links into what Kina was saying around, because really we're talking about brown fragility, right? Let's make it, create a new term. It is brown fragility.
Heard it here
it is this yeah totally. And I think part of that is also, the impact on our community is on our future generations. We have a South Asian culture is based independent of course, we full of different countries, different religions, etc. But fundamentally, we believe in us being the best we can be, right? Whether it's karma, whatever your belief system is. How can I be the best I can be when I'm just trying to be compliant to somebody else's view of me? How can we raise our children to be their true selves if they can't even say their names properly? Right? How can we encourage our children to explore the talents that they have, their natural born talents, their interests, if we just want them to be lawyers and doctors? Right? How can we have role models that, like Priti Patel, for example, that actually are just slaves to capitalism? Let's be honest, right? How can we actually have future generations of our communities to represent our spirituality, to represent our true souls? Because what we're doing is essentially making mini white people sometimes. That's how it appears to me, right? I see people sending their kids to like white dominated schools or white dominated areas, and don't hang around with those people, and make friends with these really cool white people. This is what happens, right? What is the message? The message is, I'm not good enough. The message is, to be good enough, I need to associate with this group. And if that's what we're bringing up, then we will have identity issues, suicide, mental health issues, which we do. And so when we think about statistics, and, you know, again, that report, Roll My Eyes, talks about, oh, you know, but Indian and Chinese communities are successful, right? The question is, why? And how are we defining success? Because usually it's because they've assimilated or approximated to whiteness. They've played the game. When people say to me, oh, well, I had somebody recently say to me, I don't really feel that there's much racism in the workplace, you know. And so, you know, I'll ask a few questions because they just go with the flow. They just, whatever you say, yeah, you know, don't question anything, don't challenge the status quo. So, of course, because you're the model minority myth, you work hard, you get on with it. You're grateful for being here. You're grateful for having a chance to have a job. You're grateful for being able to go to school. I'm not saying you're not grateful for those things. Don't get me wrong, right? But there's right that we have to those things. And also, that is our right because we have work, we contribute, right? So when Urmila talks about, for example, going to India and being the out group, that's what we have in the UK now with the migrants coming. You have South Asian communities who are anti-migration, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
I've seen that a lot, and it's
blows my
mind-blowing.
mind.
My mind. Like, how can you, with your life, think you're going to get yourself on a pedestal and think you're better than the people you were 50 years ago? Like, that is ridiculous to me. I cannot even. This just
in my family WhatsApp group, we're like, you know, look what Priti Patel said. You know, it's just, you just can't even make it up.
I do not understand. I feel like shaking her and just slapping her maybe a few times, but it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous the impact of that. And talking about racism in the workplace, I once got told that the only reason that I've made it so far up is because I'm not only female, I'm a female of colour. So I'm like the token that has made her way up the ranks. And I just stood gobsmacked that someone had the audacity to actually say that to me. So talking of race in a workplace, and this is what I said to you before, being in the UK previously, I was very much different socio-economic headspace, and I was very white, I would say. It's only since evolving and growing who I am as a human being that I now see things a lot more clearly. And I was young then, and I guess I hadn't really been through understanding, I don't know, like the depths of what our society is, whereas now I'm very much interested in it, and I think it's making me realize I've evolved, and I guess that's what everyone should be doing, really.
Yeah, not all of us are like constantly learning, I think. Just in the interest of time, I'm just going to go to the next question. So Ara Simmons is asking, what are some of the ways that we might help as allies in mitigating fear of losing it if we stand up? So does anyone want to take this question?
I mean, I can take it if you like. I think the key part of that, and thanks, Ada, she's from Aotearoa, big up to New Zealand. I think the main way that we can mitigate our fear and think about, actually sit down and think about, and this is what I do with the Whiteness Matrix work, is actually, you know, we don't ask ourselves the question, what do we want for fulfillment? We ask ourselves the question all the time, what do we want for success? Which is really a cookie cutter. Yeah. So if I want to live according to my values, right, what are my values? So people talk about South Asian communities, it's all about family, it's all about looking after each other. Only if you kind of, you know, marry someone like Gujarati or marry, you know, whatever the situation is, it is conditional. You know, if we want to move away from kind of being fear-based, we have to do the inner work. There is no way around it. People want to talk about how-to guides and all this without doing the inner work. You know, we all have how-to guides for stuff. We have how-to guides for how to be fit and healthy, how to give up smoking. What gets in the way? The fear, the uncertainty, the anxiety, because we don't want to lean into that discomfort. That's essentially what it's around. So if we want to help allies mitigate their fear, they need to work on themselves. And what is your fear? What are you really tired? What are you scared of losing? And also, I think the $1 million question is also, you know, what are you going to lose if you do nothing? Because what you know, what the research shows us, especially towards the last years of our life, and I don't want to be more morbid about it, but you know, the regrets of the dying, it's not I wish I'd earned more money. It's not I wish I'd stepped on somebody else to get up the career ladder. It's I wish I'd spent more time with the people I love. I wish I'd lived my values. I wish I loved the person I wanted to love with and be with them rather than someone else's should. You know, so in the work that I do, for example, I talk to a lot of people around, you know, ask yourself the question when you're thinking about being an ally and you're worried about it, you know, really ask yourself the question, what is holding you back? And then make a decision and own your decision. If your decision is actually, I like my lifestyle, I like X, Y, and Z, and even though the cost is this, I'm going to do it, then own it. But when you don't have that process, that is when you do harm to yourself, psychological harm, because it's unprocessed stuff, you know. And so that's what I would suggest for people. You have to do the inner work. There's no shortcut here. There's no tick box thing to do. There's no course to, I mean, yeah, you can go on things to support yourself, but essentially it is the inner work because we all have fear. And psychologically, of course, we know it's, you know, activates our ego, our child self, you know, the list goes on. If we don't do that work, really, we're not only harming others, we're harming ourselves. And if you're parents or if you care for the younger generations moving forward, you're not helping them because we're just going to have intergenerational trauma, intergenerational colonialism. And basically what anti-blackness is loyalty to colonialism. That's all it is, right? So let's just call it. But yeah, don't get me started.
That was
That's
a nice,
brilliant insight.
yeah, wonderful. And this one that you said, okay, what are we going to lose, correct? So this is also where I come in. A therapist, I would say that do is like mind is the cause of all this stress, anxiety, trauma, events from that we have from the events we get the trauma and saying anxiety, depressed, all this thing comes to the health issue. And I saw the people why they are having these health issues is they're suppressing their emotions. And what happens when emotions are suppressed? It has to come out, correct? So it comes in a different way. Oh, I have a back pain, I have this issue, health issue. So just understand step by step, we teach how to just release those fears, the system, through the different kind of protocols according to the what person is going through. And it is a journey. It is a journey. It's not like Rome was not built in the day. And why you are holding, correct? You're holding is a fear because they are in the comfort zone. I'm so much comfort here. Why I should go and do some kind of a yoga, why? But I have all these issues, there's a talk on that. But they are in their comfort zone, and it's hard to get them out of that comfort zone to do something. And that is also one of the things that yeah.
Sorry, Urmila, I cut you off there. Have you
No,
finished or?
Yes, yeah, I'm finished.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, with the time lag, it's sometimes hard to know when it's the the technical thing. But I guess I just want to add there, leaning into discomfort is something we don't teach our children, right? Especially in South Asian communities, we teach them we either teach them to dismiss their feelings, invalidate their feelings, push them away because we haven't got time for them right now. So even if a child says, I'm bored, don't fix it. Let them sit with that discomfort. When they're upset, let them sit with it. We're not building resilience for our young people. I had someone great speak the other day in Aotearoa, and she spoke about what is resilience, right? And especially in young ones. And I might be old. I don't know what everyone's age is, but when I was young, you'd play out on the street until it was dark, right? That's what you do. You just play out, and then you come home when it gets dark, right? And that builds our resilience in so many different ways, because when we have an argument with our friends, right, we just deal with it. There's not a parent to pick us up at 4 o'clock, say, how was your day? Oh my gosh, what happened? Oh, we better fix it. You just deal with it. You cry on your way home. You get into a fight. You go to your friends' homes, whatever they look like, whatever they sound like, because there's no filter. Well, should you really go to, why don't you have a play date with this person? You don't have a social organizer. You just go and do what you do, you go and do your thing. But because we don't build that tolerance for discomfort, exactly like you say, going back to your point, I think, if I'm understanding you correctly, Urmila, is actually what we're doing is we're not then understanding fear, because all we try and do is push it underneath.
Yeah.
And so I think that when we think about racism and anti-Blackness, we have to talk to our children about it. Because when we don't talk to our children about it, they fill in the gaps. And they fill in the gaps with what's around them, which is white supremacy thinking. Yeah.
Correct. Very good. Yes. I would say about this, then you say, yeah, the fear, how can we take out? Like when, we're comparing with here, I mean, United States of India, in Belgium also, you cannot laugh loud. You are not supposed to laugh loud. You're not supposed to talk loud. You're not to express yourself. In India, the girl pulling that water from the well, all the group from the town village are there, and there is a fight going between two, and they will shout and scream at one another, and next day they are friends. I mean, they help each other. But if it happens to countries like Europe or USA, it's like, oh, you won't talk. There's no friend anymore for the rest of your life, isn't it? So we are not, we don't learn how to express our emotions here. We have to be nice, we have to kind, we have to smile, give a smile, just even we don't want to, just make a smile. So those are the things that cause is also one of the things that it's hard, we cannot express our emotions that easily, and that we need to also learn.
Really interesting points there. Thanks, Urmila, for sharing that. It's making me think about my undergraduate course, and we had some modules around high expressed emotion within adolescents and families, and there was some research around that, but I won't go off on a tangent. I feel like that will be another panel discussion. Should we just go to a few of the comments then? We've got Chanel Peterson.
Yeah.
I'm Caribbean American with Black Indian descent. I've experienced trauma within relationships, having been unaccepted by families. How can we assist others dealing with this in their communities? Wow, just like that's such a really good question. And again, I'm just wondering if anybody wants to take that, put your hand up and then just start.
I would add a short one, then sorry, I come in between all the time. I have experience. It was not different colors, race, same Patel, and still I went through, like I said, my brother is going through, but I myself, talking about my personal experience, she's asking how can we assist others. First, we have to heal ourselves out of this. We have to let go, release everything. That's what I did. The moment I said, it was hard. It took time, years. I'm 63 actually, I'll say. And I'm recently, I'm still one by one, step by step releasing those parts. But most of the part, recently a chunk I released a couple of months ago and say, wow, look at me here. Really. So it took decades, so many cries, so many tears, so many things, and so many healing has happened so it's also a journey to start putting one step to say, okay, I'm going to do this for me, I'm going to heal myself. How I'm going to heal, where I can find therapist, you are ask help at the therapist, person who is professional, go to them and ask for help. And then once you are in that position, slightly 100% happen at one time, but once you feel I'm comfortable now, then you can be able to, we can help others when we help ourselves.
Thank you, Urmila. Poon, did you want to add to that? Yeah.
I think having been obviously I'm in a mixed relationship myself from quite a traditional Gujarati family, and actually I was engaged previously to an Indian as well, same caste, same everything. So as you can imagine, the difference was quite big for my family when I came back to say I'm not engaged anymore and I've got a new boyfriend. Big, obviously, answers to that. I think that what Urmila said about the trauma and managing that yourself, I completely agree. I think you need to deal with the situation yourself and empower yourself to be able to have the right conversations with your family, knowing that the decisions you have made are definitely not, and there's nothing, like, obviously we're all human beings, so we shouldn't be treated any differently. I think that for me, I built really strong relationship with my partner and discussed all of these, all of the impact of what people might think of me based on the decisions that I've made to obviously be with a Jamaican man. And we kind of fought the fight together almost. We supported each other through meeting family, and he's been amazing. Like, the day where he met, obviously, my dad's older brothers, that was probably a very prominent memory in my mind, and a very difficult situation as well, because I knew what people were saying behind my back. But we went forward and introduced him to everyone, and he instead of fighting, we went with it with love. We just showed up our happy selves, and it was Christmas Eve, which is a big tradition in our family where we all eat lots of chicken curry and it's delicious. But I think that we came into that catch up thinking people are going to say all these things, when we decided to just be ourselves and show who we are in our relationship and how we are with each other, it kind of alleviated the things that people were going to say about us anyway. So I think that you just need to make sure that you are happy in yourself, you are happy and content in your situation, and you and your partner are on the same page, because really it should be you two against the world. And I think that will really help you along the way. But it is hard. Like, I fought it for months. It took me a long time to figure out that actually what I was doing was not wrong, and my decisions were not against anyone's will, and I'm not doing anything bad. But again, those are the biases that are ingrained in us from being so young, that we have to obviously work ourselves out of. But it takes time. And I wish you all the best.
And I just wanted to add that just working through that, that is excellent modeling. You can support others by showing them that you're doing your work, whatever that looks like, And I think that often we don't do that. We wait for the outcome. Well, we know that we are social learners, right? We are a species who loves people, we have. So I think sometimes we don't always show, not necessarily in the detail, but, when we can model to everyone, to our peers, at work, at home, with our kids, that we are just processing stuff. We're just figuring it out. Yeah. That is so healing, right? Because not only does it bring people in, but it shows that being vulnerable, not having the answers, that's okay. Because the validation that I need comes from me, and doesn't come from external. That will give me the ability to withstand more difficulties along the way, compared to always seeking the external validation, and also always seeking an outcome that often we want to be perfect, right? So yeah,
I think that's great putting it. I actually told my mum like that. It was like, Mum, I've been going through this stuff, seeing someone and I don't know how to tell you. And it was more like me telling her of miles rather than me telling her what I was doing. So it almost made her empathize with me, as opposed to be defensive of the decision that I had made. And I think that really, really helped us and my family, really, in our relationship overall. So yeah, I agree.
Thank you so much for those responses. We'll go to the next couple of comments. Hadil Ali.
Yeah, so
creating a human hierarchy within the South Asian community through assuming a person's worth is inherently based on their status, occupation, education, and social economic status.
And this is the second part of his comment.
Yep, so this normalizes creating a hierarchy between people and contributes to anti-Blackness. We need to recognize the inherent worthiness of every human being so that we may counteract anti-Blackness.
The socio-economic point, though, would be capitalism. Like, that's the world that we live in, unfortunately, on the most part. So I think that's away from, although it does have cultural impact and skin tone impact, I do think that is a very big question to kind of deconstruct, really.
Yeah, I think it's more of a statement rather than a question, and I think it just makes us think about how broad this is and how huge this is actually. And Sam's point about intersectionality and really thinking about how do each of these components kind of play a part in this, and how do we then hold the nuance around understanding how this impacts particular groups of people as well. I'm just mindful of the time. Kino, could you just give me a check-in? How we doing?
Yeah, so we are at 9 o'clock UK time.
Okay.
So we are supposed to end technically, but if everyone's happy to continue for another 5 to 10 minutes or so.
Okay, so let's get back to our kind of questions that we had. Okay, so you're highlighting it. Which one was it? Was we question number 4?
So there's a few questions. We won't have time to go through all of them, but maybe one of them. You can decide, Tina.
Oh, great, thanks. Leave me with the big decision. Okay, so I think we've answered kind of like how do we address bias, and how we can support Black communities. Okay, this is the one that I've been pondering on and has come up in recent conversations for myself, with people around me as well. Cultural appropriation within the South Asian community. And kind of how we may or may not appreciate versus appropriate Black culture. I was born in the 80s and I grew up in the 90s. I grew up listening to R&B, hip hop. I was a garage girl, still am. And, I think to myself that listening to that type of music has hugely shaped my thinking, my being, my existence. But it makes me wonder, why do we lean into this? And, it makes me think about the cultural appropriation that does occur within our communities around, kind of adopting fashion and music and language to that point within the communities in the UK in particular. I can only comment on. Where do we sit with that? How do we even start to deconstruct that? So I'm wondering if you can kind of come in on that, because you kind of, go for it.
I would like to say I'm also a garage girl.
Yeah.
All the rest of it, like Seeing Jagged Edge, 112, it's all that. But I feel as though I wasn't very in tune with my Indian side, yet I had obviously brown skin. So for me, I just felt as though genre of music and that community fit me better than any other sense of music, genre, or community fit me. And that's why I that resonated with me more. I think I had cousins that listened to Bollywood music, but I was never really into that, or Bhangra or Punjabi music, but I was never really into that. And I'm from London, so my friends were a mixed bag of people. In terms of appropriation versus appreciation, for me it was trying to find my identity in the blur that existed at the time of being an Indian girl in the 90s living in London with a very Indian family, yet a white centric mindset that listened to Black and Afro-Caribbean music. So it was a very mixed bag of who I am as a person. But I think that the fashion, the clothes, the music is, like you said, part of my being. And it was mainly because that was the genre that resonated with me more than any other genre did, being a white Asian. But I guess these days there's like Brit Asian music, and there's these segments that are suited or created to suit those diverse people. But everybody's different, I guess. I mean, I went through an indie phase as well, so it all kind of, music for me is very much a part of who I am. So I think I would like to call it culturally appreciation for the Black culture as opposed to appropriation. But it's complex. Obviously, we're hearing all about blackfishing these days, but again, 100 years ago there was blackface. So it's a crazy world we live in, really.
I've actually got something just to add on to that. So growing up, I've also been kind of either jokingly been called white or jokingly be called black, just because of like music I might listen to or clubs that I might go to or whatever it is. And again, I feel like it's appreciation if I'm listening to R&B or hip hop and stuff like that. So I think as consumers of this stuff, we genuinely do appreciate it because when lots of us were growing up in like the diaspora, we just didn't really have anything Asian that was seen as cool. So we did kind of go to something that wasn't white, that was maybe closer to our culture that we related to a bit more. Yeah. But also in when it comes to like the makers of the music, I remember when Chamak Cholo became really popular. I don't know if any of you have heard that song, but Akon was on it, and it was like a Bollywood song. I think it was Akon. He was on the track, but they didn't actually show his face. So he was on the song. It was in a big Bollywood movie. I've completely forgotten the name, but yeah, big song. And more recently, there was that song Jalebi Baby, and Jason Derulo kind of jumped on it. And I remember the Blindian Page project, like Jonah from the Blindian project, he kind of compared the two, because the first one, it had Akon, but because it didn't like show his face, it didn't really acknowledge that it was, you know, a black guy that was becoming involved with Bollywood, and there was this collaboration. It was a little bit dodgy in a way. So I feel like that could be seen as appropriation, because it was like kind of stealing his talents, not really fully appreciating it. And now we've kind of come to a stage where you can kind of see the collaboration, you can kind of see more Black and brown unity, and now it's a bit more appreciation from like the music maker's perspective. I don't know if that fully makes sense.
Interesting. It's like Punjabi. I remember going into clubs sometimes and they'd just bust Punjabi MC on, and you're like, "Ooh, who have you done this for?"
Yeah, exactly.
Or Apache Indian.
Yeah, Indian.
I'm old enough to remember that, Sam.
Okay, thank God.
Oh, I saw him live here, actually. I know who he is.
Oh, okay, cool.
I mean, Sam, do you have a position on this as a psychologist, you know?
I think there's probably just one thing I'd like to add. I think that we need to, again, the inner work is, you know, am I appreciating or am I appropriating? Appropriating is obviously when you're not acknowledging, you know, the tradition or the origins of something, you know. And I guess sometimes we can, all of us, you know, think we're appreciating when actually we're appropriating. So say, for example, and what our role is in that. So if we say, and you'll be far better expert at me than this, Urmila, but say with yoga, you know, there's a lot of stuff out there around how, you know, there's a lot of appropriation with yoga. But even now, so many people in the South Asian community contribute to appropriation rather than appreciation. So I think whether it's to do with Black culture or other cultures, I think it's a big question for us to ask ourselves. And I think it's work in progress as we become hopefully more aware and also more educated. One thing I wanted to say, really, I know we're finishing off, is, if there's one thing that anyone can take away from this, is really, without self-awareness, we can do nothing. Without educating ourselves about oppression, the histories of oppression, even within the UK, we have the Race Relations Amendment Act. Why? Because the Black community made that happen, which has huge benefits for us in the South Asian communities. Do our young people even know that? Right? So without education, I think, and awareness and understanding of oppression, I think the question of appropriation appreciation is harder to answer. I don't know if that really answers the question, but it raises another question. Oh, surprise. Yeah.
I knew you'd do that, Sam. I knew you'd do that.
Yeah.
Urmila, I mean,
Technical issue.
Technical.
Sorry, we couldn't quite get what you were saying, and I just wanted to hear
We're
your
having technical issue. I didn't hear much of their questions.
Okay. So one of the things that we were discussing was how, as South Asians,
Can you
we
hear me?
adopt
Can you hear?
aspects. We can hear you.
Yeah.
Can you hear us?
No, I can't hear you.
Oh, that's a shame.
Her network connection's quite low.
Cutting off is frozen off and on.
Oh. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, can you repeat?
Okay, I'll try and repeat the question. So one of the things we were discussing, Urmila, was how in the South Asian community, we take certain elements of things from the Black culture, for example, music or fashion. I'm just thinking of, when there was a phase when I saw photographs of my uncles and they all donned an afro back in the 70s because it was a cool thing to do. And we can kind of, expand on why that could possibly be. But for somebody who's kind of grown up in Africa, has had that sort of life, what's your opinion on how we as South Asians take things from the Black community and use them? And what do you see there?
So what I would have to add to this one is that, culture, whatever, everybody has that. And it is it's created from generations, from hard work. People have sweated, a lot of people have lost their lives to even culture. So it's a tech culture thing. And if they misuse, nowadays everything is open. So it's fine. I can wear gomez if I want because I feel comfortable. Why not? People are wearing sari. Okay, why not? And misuse has happened. Because of there is a big market for money making market, and they will say, okay, I'm going to put the dresses of use other cultures. So that is the point where I really am against that. And I think the culture where it comes from, they are frustrated. Like for yoga you are telling, I heard last year that one of my leaders was telling that some of the American, come on, you have created yoga, correct? So there's not, so all these things, it would frustrate that. It's not like just, hey, I got it, I'm going to make money, I know how to go online, cheating and put it out, and this is mine. No, it does not happen. So in that way, if it is misused, then I'm against that. If it's not misused and you say, okay, I'm going to, they want to heal them. They want to have all this, have a nice, world is opening, world is becoming very nowadays. We are all like one part of color basket, different color. We stay together, we enhance, empower each other, we inspire each other through our cultures. We share with each other our food, different misuse. Then I would tweet.
Thank you for that, Urmila. I think we had a few technical issues from our end trying to capture
I hope
all
I have
of that.
answered the
I
question.
hope that you got the gist of it. I think I did. So I guess...
Can I just add one thing? Sorry, Tina.
Go
Just
for it,
quickly,
Sam.
is that
Yeah.
as therapists, I think it's really important that we recognize when cultural appropriation is happening, even in therapy space. You know, theories, alleged new schools of thought, you know, BS, when actually a lot of it is cultural appropriation, right? You know, and I think it's important, you know, whether it's people call it, you know, it's all about PQRST, DBT, CBT, you know, la. But really, sometimes it's actually up for us to question. And if we don't go in with that critical mind, we cannot be sure that we're not culturally appropriating. You know, and I think in the positions of power and privilege that we have, you know, we need to check our privilege. You know, if we don't check our privilege, then essentially we don't know the answer to that question.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
That's exactly what we're trying to do at BTN, Brown Therapist Network. Absolutely. So I'm just conscious that we do need to round up and finish up. You know, any last few comments, anything that you want to add?
So I just want to say, firstly, one thing that I think everyone sort of mentioned at some point, it's going to sound really cheesy, but everyone kind of mentioned, you know, just leaning into our emotions and kind of going forward with compassion. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things that we can all sort of take away. Like, obviously, no one can fully have the answer on how to solve and eradicate anti-Blackness, but we all have some kind of level of compassion. And it's really important just to remember that and kind of lean into that, I think. And Priti Patel, even if you're watching, I believe even Priti Patel would have a small ounce of compassion that she could lean into. And if she does, then, you know, we all have hope. So that's just one thing.
A glass of wine with her, actually. It could be an interesting conversation or two.
It would be interesting to chat to her. And
Awesome.
also, if any South Asian therapists are watching right now and they want to like work on their own biases and anything that they're holding, then Sam, do you want to tell people about your course?
Yeah, sure. I've developed a short course to look at anti-racist practice as therapists. I think a lot of the time we do inadvertently contribute to the status quo, which is essentially a practice that does not acknowledge and appreciate racialized trauma, for example, model minority myths that we perpetuate and we contribute to. And if we're not asking ourselves these questions, how can we support our clients? Whether they be South Asian or not doesn't really matter. Change can only happen through us having a systemic and critical lens to what we do. Otherwise, the status quo will prevail. So the sessions are really designed around different topics, looking at exploration, leaning into the discomfort, but also strategies to support you in your practice to ensure that you don't only practice in a way that's ethical, but you practice in a way that supports well-being on all levels, not just conforming to the capitalist view of success, essentially. So that's what the course is about. Yeah.
Brilliant. And we
Join
also
up.
have, yeah, and we have more information on our website, browntherapistnetwork.com.
Brilliant. Okay. Thank you to our amazing panelists, Poonam, Urmila, and Sam. Thank you so much. We're all over the world. I'm in Doha, Sam's in New Zealand, Urmila's in the US, and Poo and Keenal are in the UK. So we're all dotted around the world, which has been a wonderful experience to be connecting with you all today. If you found this helpful, please do subscribe and comment and let us know how you've found this session, and get involved. Let us know what you'd like us to cover next, because we learn from you, and we want this to be a collaborative discussion, really. Thank you everyone who's joined, and I wish you all a great day and evening wherever you are in the world. So have a good rest of whatever you're doing.
Thanks, guys, for all.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
See you.